February 23, 1943. Telefunken headquarters, Berlin. The magnifying glass quivered slightly in Oberstleutnant Runger's hand as he studied the copper block recovered from the wreckage 3 weeks earlier. "This can't be real," he scribbled in his classified report. No nation could achieve such compact design while producing this level of power. Through the frost-streaked laboratory window, Runger could see smoke curling above the bombed-out factories of Berlin. A grim reminder of Allied air dominance. Yet on his workbench lay something that defied belief. Pop. Tangible proof that the technological gap was far worse than Germany's high command had dared to imagine. The device, recovered from a downed British Stirling bomber near Rotterdam on the night of February 2nd, measured scarcely 10 centimeters across. Known as a cavity magnetron, the British invention produced microwave radar frequencies so advanced that it rendered every existing German countermeasure obsolete. It was elegant in design, devastating in implication, and far beyond anything German science had yet conceived. What Runger and his colleagues didn't realize was that this small copper cylinder had been costing Grand Admiral Karl Dürr knits 40 submarines a month. Hemorrhage of men and machines threatened to decide the Battle of the Atlantic in weeks. Germany's defeat was being calculated not in naval tactics, but in electromagnetic wavelengths invisible to their radar detectors. The psychological shift had begun. That frigid February morning, Dutch resistance members near Rotterdam watched as German troops sealed off the crash site with unusual urgency. The Stirling bomber, serial number R9-264 of No. 7 Squadron RAF, had been returning from only its second combat mission when flak ripped through its port wing. The crew of 7 died instantly, but their loss would prove a priceless gain for the Allied cause. Inside the wreckage was Britain's newest secret weapon, the H-2S ground mapping radar, designed to guide bombers through cloud and darkness, pinpointing targets with unprecedented accuracy. At its heart lay the cavity magnetron, a device so revolutionary that even Winston Churchill had agonized over whether to risk its deployment, fearing exactly what had now occurred. The bomber had taken part in a raid on Cologne, following the H-2S system's combat debut against Hamburg just 3 days earlier, on January 30th, 1943. Within hours of the crash, General der Luft, Nachrichten Wolfgang Martini, Chief of Luftwaffe Signals Intelligence, and Germany's foremost radar expert, was alerted. As head of all radar development and communications, Martini immediately grasped the significance of what had fallen into their hands. The Rotterdam wreck might hold answers to the baffling questions haunting German command. For months, he dispatched his most experienced technical teams to the crash site. Their first inspection confirmed both his deepest fears and his greatest hopes. The bomber's belly contained equipment unlike anything the Luftwaffe had ever seen. A rotating antenna array, a cathode ray display, a complex power unit, all evidence of a radar system operating on principles German engineers had once theorized but dismissed as impossible to implement. Then came the true revelation. When Martini's technicians carefully removed the transmitter assembly, they found a component that defied their understanding of physics and engineering's, the magnetron, British model, CV-64. A solid copper cylinder, roughly 8 centimeters wide and 12 long. Its 8 precisely machined cavities encircled a central cathode, flanked by powerful permanent magnets. It looked deceptively simple, but field tests revealed it could generate immense microwave power at frequencies that German instruments could neither reproduce nor detect. Martini ordered it sent to Berlin under armed guard. He had seen enough to know this single device might explain why. Do Nitz's U. Boats were dying in unprecedented numbers. The British had achieved the impossible. A compact, high-power radar small enough for aircraft and ships, granting detection capabilities for which Germany had no defense. But the story had begun months earlier, far from the laboratories of Berlin. In the grey, restless waters of the North Atlantic, throughout late 1942 and early 1943, U-boat commanders reported increasingly terrifying encounters with Allied aircraft that seemed almost supernatural in their ability to find them. Capit Lieutenant Hans Joachim Schwank, commanding U-43, filed one such report in December 1942. His boat had been crossing the Bay of Biscay on a moonless night, surfaced to recharge its batteries. When floodlights suddenly flared overhead. There had been no warning from the Metox radar detector. No engine noise, no sign of an approaching plane. Depth charges rained down, forcing a desperate crash. Dive that nearly destroyed the vessel. We were blind. Schwank wrote in his war diary. The Metox gave no warning. The aircraft seemed to appear from the darkness itself. Only luck saved us. Our detector should have sounded minutes before. Instead, it was silent. Either the British have developed radar our instruments cannot sense, or they are using a new technology we cannot comprehend. Whatever it is, we are being hunted by enemies we cannot see until they strike. Similar reports flooded U-boat command headquarters in Paris that winter. Submarines were being ambushed on the surface at night without warning. Allied aircraft seemed to see through darkness, cloud, even fog that should have concealed them. The Metox detectors, once reliable against older ASV Mark SIR radar systems operating on a 1.5 meter wavelengths, had become worse than useless, giving commanders false confidence while offering no protection against the new, shorter microwave frequencies. The numbers told the grim truth. In November 1942, German U-boats sank 119 merchant ships, totaling 729 Severosen tons for the loss of 13 submarines. By December, the total had fallen to 60 ships and 5 U-boats lost. January 1943, 37 ships sunk, 7 U-boats lost. February, only 34 ships destroyed, but 17 submarines gone. The exchange rate that had once favored Germany was collapsing fast. Admiral Karl Dion Nitz, promoted to Commander-in-Chief of the Kriegsmarine on January 30, 1943, while still overseeing U-boat operations, studied the mounting losses with growing alarm. His headquarters tracked every submarine's position. Every convoy wrote every encounter, but the patterns made no sense. U-boats attacking at night were intercepted before they could strike. Boats crossing the Bay of Biscay under cover of darkness were bombed with pinpoint precision. Even submarines running submerged by day were somehow detected and destroyed. The unseen hand of microwave radar had changed the course of the war. And not even Germany's finest scientists yet understood why. Allied aircraft now seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to locate German submarines under conditions where visual detection was utterly impossible. Many attacks occurred in weather so poor that no human eye could have seen a thing. Yet the strikes came with terrifying precision. Korvettenkapitän Gerd Hessler, Admiral Dion Nitz's own son-in-law, who had married his daughter Ursula in 1937, served as first staff officer at U-boat headquarters. For weeks, Hessler pored over combat reports, desperately searching for an explanation behind the growing number of mysterious losses. A clear pattern emerged, but it made no sense. Between late 1942 and early 1943, Allied detection capabilities had improved dramatically, far too quickly to be explained by better tactics or training. Something new had entered the war. Some kind of technology that could pierce fog, cloud, and night. That could detect a submarine's tiny conning tower or the faint ripple of a periscope wake from miles away. The questions multiplied faster than the answers. Throughout January and February 1943, Admiral Karl Dion Nitz convened a series of crisis meetings with Germany's top scientists and engineers. What these discussions revealed was both alarming and humbling. The Germans knew far less about Allied capabilities than they had believed, and their confidence in their own technological superiority had become dangerously complacent. Radar specialists insisted that no radar system could function effectively at wavelengths shorter than 50 centimeters. The limits of vacuum tube power generation, they argued, made such high frequency radar impossible for combat use. The Metox detectors, standard equipment aboard every U-boat, were designed to pick up Allied radar signals at roughly 1.5 meter wavelengths, providing several minutes of warning before an aircraft could close for attack. Yet, lately, those detectors had gone silent. Something had changed, but no one knew what. Some scientists speculated that the Allies had developed infrared sensors capable of detecting engine heat from a submarine's exhaust. Others suggested acoustic detection, though such a system seemed implausible at the ranges involved. A few mentioned the theoretical possibility of centimetric radar using advanced magnetron technology. But this idea was dismissed almost immediately. German research had already concluded that such systems offered no practical military advantage and would require massive investment to develop. The British can't possibly have solved a problem that defeated German science. The experts reassured Die Nauru, NITS. Our engineers are the best in the world. To them, the notion that war-torn Britain, under constant bombing, could produce radar more advanced than Germany's was absurd. That confidence shattered completely when Runger's team at Telefunken began examining the mysterious copper device recovered from the wreck near Rotterdam. The magnetron arrived in Berlin on February 5, 1943. Along with photographs of the full H-2S radar installation and detailed field reports. Runger assembled Germany's best microwave specialists to form what became known as the Rotterdam Working Group. Arbeitskreis Rotterdam. Their mission: to determine exactly what the device was, how it functioned, and what it meant for the war. Their first technical meeting took place at Telefunken headquarters on February 27 or 23rd. Initial tests performed on February 6 quickly revealed the magnetron's astonishing principle of operation. Within hours, the scientists realized that the cylindrical cavities acted as resonant chambers, amplifying electromagnetic oscillations as electrons spiraled through a powerful magnetic field. Conceptually, it resembled older split, anode magnetron prototypes German engineers had played with in the 1930s. But this British version displayed an engineering precision that stunned everyone present. Dr. Otto Hakenberg, a young physicist assigned to document the investigation, later recalled the moment of realization in post-war interviews. When we first powered the magnetron using laboratory equipment, the frequency counter showed 3.3 gigahertz, a frequency we could hardly measure, let alone generate at that strength. The output meter read 40 kilowatts of peak power. It was like discovering the enemy had artillery when we still thought the battlefield only allowed rifles. We instantly understood why the Metox was useless. It detected radar operating around 200 megahertz, a wavelength of about 1.5 meters. But this device worked at 9.1 centimeters, 16 times shorter. Our detectors were utterly blind to it. We'd been fighting in darkness while the enemy saw us with perfect clarity. For 2 relentless weeks, Runger's team worked day and night to reconstruct the entire H-2S radar system from the wreckage. The magnetron powered a rotating antenna, scanning a full 360 degrees beneath the aircraft. Reflected signals appeared on a cathode ray display. The plan position indicator, producing a map-like image that revealed coastlines, rivers, cities, and terrain in remarkable detail. For the first time, British bomber crews could navigate and identify targets through complete darkness and cloud cover. The system had been designed primarily for strategic bombing, allowing Pathfinder aircraft to mark targets for entire bomber streams regardless of weather. Germany's natural shield of darkness was gone. But the implications for submarine warfare were even more devastating. The same magnetron principle, when adapted to air-to-surface search radar, designated ASV, Mark E theory, allowed Allied craft to detect a submarine's conning tower from 20 miles away, day or night, in any weather. The small radar profile that had once made boats nearly invisible was now meaningless. Worse still, the microwave emissions of this new radar were completely undetectable by German receivers. All existing systems, including the trusted Metox, operated in the meter wave band between 1.3 and 2.6 meters, tuned for older ASV Mark II radars. The new centimetric radar, operating at 9.1 centimeters, was 17 times higher in frequency, utterly invisible to German instruments. The U-boats were sailing blind into ambushes, their defenses obsolete, without their crews even realizing it. The technological surprise was total and catastrophic. On February 23, 1943, the Rotterdam Working Group presented its findings to Germany's senior military and industrial leadership. While no surviving documents confirm the personal presence of Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring or Admiral D.O. Nitz, both were briefed shortly afterward. Representatives from all major German electronics firms, Telefunken, Siemens, AG, and Lorenz, filled the conference room alongside Luftwaffe and Kriegsmarine officers. The atmosphere was grim. Runge began with a statement later, found in Allied archives after the war. We must report with complete honesty that the British have achieved a technological breakthrough of extraordinary significance. The cavity magnetron represents an advance in microwave generation exceeding German capabilities by at least 3 years of normal development. More critically, it enables radar detection systems for which we currently have neither countermeasures nor defenses. He then outlined the technical details of the CV-64 magnetron. 8 resonant cavities machined into a copper block, operating at 3.3 GHz, a wavelength of 9.1 cm with a peak output of 40 kW. Compact, durable, and clearly mass-produced rather than experimental. It proved that Britain had mastered a new generation of radar manufacturing. The implications were staggering. If the British could produce these devices in quantity, and the workmanship suggested they could, then every Allied aircraft and ship could soon carry radar against which Germany was defenseless. The entire German radar network, from night fighter systems to coastal detection arrays, all operating in the meter band, was suddenly outdated. Göring, when shown a demonstration of the recovered H2S system, reportedly at the Humboldthain Flak Tower in Berlin, reacted with visible dismay. The man who once boasted that no enemy bomber will ever reach the Ruhr now faced proof that British bombers could find and strike targets in any weather, at any time. Dean Netz grasped the situation with grim clarity. His U-boat fleet had lost 39 submarines in just 3 months. 7 in January, 17 in February, with additional losses in December. If that rate continued, the Atlantic campaign would collapse within months. Captain Zur See, Eberhard Gott, Dunitz's operations chief, maintained precise statistical records. His charts told a bleak truth. By early 1943, U-boats were being destroyed faster than they could be built, despite German shipyards producing 20 to 24 per month. Worse still, the loss of seasoned crews outpaced the training of replacements. The meeting's classified summary, later captured by Allied forces, recorded two critical conclusions. Germany could not reproduce the cavity magnetron in operational numbers before 1944 at the earliest. The machining tolerances, copper purity, specialized alloys, and cobalt-based magnets required were beyond immediate German capability. Even a crash priority project would take many months to begin. Developing effective countermeasures against the new British radar would require at least 6 months. Time Germany no longer had. A new generation of radar warning receivers, tuned to centimetric frequencies, could, in theory, be designed to detect the Allied systems, but production and fleet-wide installation across the entire U-boat arm would take well into 1944. The challenge was immense. Developing receivers capable of detecting signals at 3.3 gigahertz pushed the limits of German experience in microwave engineering. Worse still, intelligence indicated that the British likely possessed more advanced versions of the captured system. The Rotterdam magnetron operated at 9.1 centimeters, but Allied scientists were probably already experimenting with 3-centimeter wavelengths, technology that would render any future German countermeasures obsolete before they even reached the front. The technological race wasn't just lost. It was unwinnable within the remaining time of the war. Britain and America held an insurmountable head start. Supported by industrial capacity, Germany could no longer match. Admiral Karl Dionitz absorbed these reports in grim silence. His U-boat headquarters, relocated near Paris in March 1942, after the Saint Nazaire commando raid, exposed the vulnerability of the Lorient base, maintained detailed charts tracking every patrol, every loss, and every convoy engagement. The story those maps told was clearer and crueler than any statistical report. Red pins marking U-boat patrol positions had thinned dramatically across the North Atlantic. Blue pins, Allied convoys, now crossed routes that once belonged to the wolf packs. Black pins, representing sunken submarines, clustered ominously along the Bay of Biscay and other key patrol zones. We have been fighting blind, Dionitz told his senior officers after reviewing the findings from the Rotterdam device. Every advantage we believed we had has been erased by Allied technology we didn't even know existed. Surprise attacks at night mean nothing when the enemy can see through total darkness. The Atlantic's vastness offers no cover when radar can find a conning tower from 20 miles away. Our detectors gave us false confidence, but no protection. The question now was simple. What could be done? while German engineers scrambled to devise new detectors and countermeasures that wouldn't arrive until 1944. Gerd Hessler proposed several desperate tactical adjustments. U-boat commanders were to be warned that radar warning systems could no longer be trusted. Submarines were ordered to remain submerged as long as possible, surfacing only when absolutely necessary to recharge batteries or travel at higher speed. Anti-aircraft weaponry would be increased, though this was recognized as a futile measure. Allied aircraft could detect U-boats long before the submarines could even see their attackers. Most ominously, D.O. Nitz and his staff began to consider that the entire Atlantic campaign might soon become untenable. If losses continued at the current rate, and Allied shipbuilding continued to expand, the mathematical outcome was inevitable. Germany was losing the tonnage war. The U-boats could no longer sink merchant ships faster than the Allies could replace them. March 1943. The apex and the collapse. March 1943 marked both the high point and the beginning of the end for the German U-boat force. The largest convoy battles of the war were fought that month, with massive wolf packs of 30 to 40 submarines attempting to overwhelm Allied defences through sheer numbers. For a brief moment, it seemed the old strategy might still work. In mid-March, convoys HX-229 and SC-122 were attacked simultaneously by nearly 40 U-boats from 3 coordinated wolf packs. The battle raged from March 16 to 20, 1943. 21 merchant ships, totaling 141,000 tons, were destroyed, the heaviest losses from any convoy battle of the war. A British Admiralty assessment later admitted that Germany had never come closer to severing Britain's Atlantic lifeline, but the cost was unsustainable. U-384 was confirmed lost, with several more submarines damaged. Overall, the month's totals were devastating: 12 to 15 U-boats destroyed, depending on classification. Tactical victories meant nothing against strategic arithmetic. Allied shipyards, particularly in the United States, were producing merchant ships faster than the U-boats could sink them. The American Liberty ship program had slashed construction time from over 200 days in 1941 to an average of just 42 days by 1944. Some ships, like the SS Robert E. Peary, were built in a record 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes in 1942. More propaganda than standard practice, but proof of Allied industrial might. At peak output, American yards launched 3 Liberty ships every 2 days, roughly 1.5 ships daily. A single U-boat typically destroyed between 3,000 and 5,000 tons of shipping before being lost. The math was merciless. Even tactical success meant strategic defeat. The only way Germany could win the tonnage war was by maintaining an impossible kill-to loss ratio, one that reality refused to allow. May 1943. Black May. Then came May 1943, the month the U-boat crews would forever remember as Black May. Allied aircraft and escort ships, now equipped with centimetric ASV Mark LE-3 airborne radar and Type 271 shipborne radar, devastated the U-boat fleet with relentless precision. The turning point came during the battle for convoy ONS-5 in late April and early May. This slow-moving convoy of 43 merchant ships, protected by 16 escorts, was attacked by roughly 30 U-boats. The Germans managed to sink 12 to 13 ships, but lost 6 or 7 submarines, with several others badly damaged. For the first time, U-boat losses nearly equaled their successes. 2 weeks later, Convoy SC-130 demonstrated total Allied superiority. Of its 37 merchant ships, not a single one was lost, despite attacks from up to 33 U-boats. The Germans, however, lost 3 to 5 submarines, including U-954. By then, the pattern was irreversible. Throughout May, losses mounted at an unprecedented rate. May 4th U-209 destroyed. All May 5th U-447 and U-663 sunk. May 6th U-465 and U-563 destroyed. May 11th U-89, U-86, and U-456 lost. May 12th U-528 sunk with all hands. May 15th U-176 destroyed. May 19th U-273 and U-954 sunk. The loss of U-954 carried devastating personal weight for DU-NITS. The Type VIC boat, commanded by Capit Lieutenant Odolo, carried among its crew Lieutenant Sir C. Peter D. Nitz, the Admiral's youngest son, serving as watch officer. While attacking convoy SC-130, U-954 was detected by the River-class frigate HMS Jed and the Black Swan-class sloop HMS Senon. Both ships launched the new Hedgehog anti-submarine weapon, an array of forward-thrown explosives that detonated only on impact. When explosions followed, the British knew they had scored a direct hit. U-954 was destroyed with all 47 men lost at 54 degrees 54 north, 34 degrees 19 west. A coded telegram reached DU-NITS. U-954 attacked and sunk by British escorts HMS Jed and Senon. Hedgehog achieved direct hit. No survivors. Your son is gone. DU-NITS did not take leave. There would be time for grief after the war, if Germany survived it. For now, his duty remained with the 40 Zausen submariners still under his command. By May 22, 1943, between 41 and 43 U-boats had been lost in a single month. Roughly a quarter of the entire operational force. Over 10,000 men were dead. On May 24, DU-NITS called an emergency meeting. The operations plot showed catastrophe. Commanders dead, new crews destroyed on their first patrols, and young officers barely in their 20s vanishing beneath the Atlantic waves. That day, he made the hardest decision of his career. He drafted an order that effectively conceded defeat in the Battle of the Atlantic to all U-boats at sea. Due to the enemy's superior detection, equipment, and overwhelming air coverage, North Atlantic operations are to be suspended effective immediately. All boats are to withdraw southwest of the Azores. Operations will resume only after new detection and defensive systems are available. We have not surrendered. We have recognized reality. The impact was immediate. In June 1943, only 17 merchant ships were sunk in the Atlantic. In July, the number fell to 9. The Allied supply line, once on the brink of collapse, was now secure. The convoys that would one day carry the troops and equipment for D They were forming safely in American ports, protected by a technology that had rendered Germany's most lethal weapon obsolete. But for the men of the U-boat arm, the nightmare continued. Of the roughly 40,000 submariners who served during the war, nearly 30,000 were killed. A casualty rate of 75%, the highest of any military branch on either side. They died crushed in steel coffins, suffocated under relentless depth charge attacks, burned by fuel fires, or froze in the Black Atlantic. They fought on, knowing their technology was inferior and their mission hopeless. Because duty demanded it, and because surrendering the struggle would only hasten Germany's defeat on every front. Allied interrogations of captured U-boat crews in the summer and fall of 1943 revealed a haunting truth. The men were not merely beaten in battle. They had been defeated by science. Their courage had met a weapon they could neither see nor counter. One such man, Capit. Lieutenant Werner Henke, commander of U-515, had achieved great success, sinking multiple ships and earning the Knight's Cross. Yet on April 9, 1944, his boat was sunk by U.S. Task Group 22.3, led by the escort carrier USS Guadalcanal. Henke and about 40 of his men were captured and taken to Fort Hunt, Virginia, known officially as P.O. Box 1142. His interrogation, declassified decades later, revealed the same despair, echoing through every prisoner's words. Above. They had not been defeated by the enemy's courage, but by a revolution in technology that changed the face of modern warfare forever. We knew by mid-1943 that the war was lost. Henke told his interrogators during questioning between May 3 and June 15, 1944. It wasn't because German soldiers lacked courage or skill. It was because Allied technology had systematically destroyed every advantage we once held. The Metox radar detector, once considered a life-saving innovation, had become useless against the Allies. New centimetric radar systems. Crews grimly nicknamed it the death bell, because when it failed to warn of approaching aircraft, it tolled only for their funerals. Later models capable of detecting centimetric radar arrived far too late for most submarines. The Naxos system, introduced in September 1943, could theoretically detect these newer radar signals, but its effectiveness was limited. Even when it worked, U-boats could only detect Allied aircraft at short range, while those same aircraft could locate submarines from beyond the horizon. U-boats could dive when warned, but Allied planes would simply circle above, summoning destroyers to finish the kill with depth charges. We couldn't escape what we couldn't see, Henke explained. Henke's interrogation took a grim turn when he was falsely accused of war crimes tied to the sinking of the SS Ceramic, a passenger liner destroyed by U-515 in December 1942. Facing possible extradition to Britain to stand trial, Henke grew increasingly desperate. On June 15, 1944, he attempted to scale the perimeter fence at Fort Hunt, Virginia. Guards opened fire. Henke was killed instantly. becoming the only prisoner ever to attempt an escape from the facility during the entire Second World War. The voices of the survivors, Oberleutnant Xerxes Herbert Werner survived the conflict after serving on 5 different U-boats, including enduring the sinking of U-6112 in August 1942 and U-4 in July 1944. His post-war memoir, Iron Coffins, 1969, became one of the most acclaimed, first-hand accounts of the U-boat war from the German perspective. In it, Werner captured the psychological torment of fighting against an invisible, technologically superior enemy. Every patrol after May 1943 was a survival exercise disguised as a combat mission. We knew Allied radar could detect our periscope wakes, our snorkel exhausts, even our conning towers in heavy seas. We spent endless hours submerged, breathing foul air, rationing power, surfacing only when suffocation or exhaustion forced us to. He went on. The Atlantic, once our hunting ground, had turned against us. It hid Allied aircraft in fog and concealed their ships beyond the horizon, yet exposed our every move to machines we couldn't detect. We were being hunted by an enemy that could see everything while we were blind. Another survivor, Korvettenkapitän Peter Erich Kremer, who commanded U-333 through several successful patrols, was one of only 3 senior U-boat commanders to survive the war. His memoir, U-Boat Commander, a periscope view of the Battle of the Atlantic, 1984, offered another chilling perspective on Germany's technological defeat. Kremer described a patrol in June 1943, shortly after Dönitz had withdrawn U-boats from the North Atlantic. We were ordered to patrol off the coast of Africa, searching for isolated targets away from the heavy Allied air presence. Yet even there, aircraft appeared with impossible frequency. One afternoon, our new 1Z radar warning receiver detected a plane at extreme range. I ordered an immediate dive to 150 meters and rigged for silent running. We stayed down for 6 hours, far beyond safe endurance. When we surfaced to snorkel, the same aircraft, or perhaps another, appeared within minutes. The pattern repeated for 14 hours until our batteries were nearly dead. We had to surface or suffocate. When we did, the aircraft was waiting. Only frantic anti-aircraft fire and a crash dive that nearly crushed the hull saved us. We never fired a single torpedo that patrol. For 3 weeks, we fought just to survive long enough to see the ocean again. Kremer's words underscored what had become clear by 1943. The Allies had achieved total technological dominance. The U-boats could still fight, but not win. The desperate race for countermeasures, despite the mounting losses. German engineers continued their efforts through 1943 and 1944, working frantically to counter Allied radar. They developed the LMS-10 for magnetron, a direct copy of the British CV-64 design, with at least 4 units delivered by May 1943. However, production was crippled by material shortages, especially the cobalt needed for permanent magnets. Most early units relied on magnets salvaged from captured Allied aircraft, making mass production impossible. Telefunken began work on an indigenous version, the LMS 12th of magnetron, which sought to adapt the British design, using locally available materials. Yet it did not enter limited production until April 1944. Far too late to influence the war's outcome. By the end of the conflict, total German magnetron production numbered only a few hundred units. Allied output, by contrast, reached into the tens of thousands. The imbalance was absolute. Radar warning, receivers capable of detecting centimetric frequencies were also developed in parallel. The Fug 350 Naxos Z for aircraft and FOMB 7 Naxos U for U-boats entered service in September 1943. These systems could, in theory, detect Allied ASV Mark III radar at a wavelength of 9.1 centimeters. But by the time Naxos became operational, the Allies had already advanced to 3-centimeter systems, such as the H-2X and improved H-2S radars, rendering German detectors effectively blind. The Germans were perpetually one generation behind, forced to counter yesterday's weapons, while tomorrow's already loomed on the battlefield. Captured secrets and the limits of German innovation. A notable intelligence windfall occurred on July 13, 1944, when a Junkers Ju-88G1 night fighter mistakenly landed at RAF Woodbridge. The crew, disoriented, believed they were touching down at a German airbase. On board, the aircraft carried a suite of cutting-edge electronics, including Fug 350 Naxos Z, Fug 227 Flensburg homing gear, and Liechtenstein SN2 radar. British scientists immediately examined the captured equipment, gaining valuable insight into Germany's countermeasure capabilities. The analysis revealed that while the German systems were ingeniously designed, they remained fundamentally defensive. They could warn of Allied radar emissions, but offered no offensive capability in return. Worse still, they could only detect 9.1 cm radar, not the newer 3 cm wavelengths that now dominated Allied forces. Tactical adaptations and tactical failures in desperation. The German Navy attempted tactical solutions to counter radar supremacy. U-boats were equipped with additional anti-aircraft weaponry, and several were modified into flak boats, mounting multiple 20 Namsenaries cannons and heavier guns. The theory was brutal but simple. If they couldn't hide from radar-equipped aircraft, they would stay on the surface and fight back. In practice, it was a disaster. Allied aircraft could spot U-boats from well beyond the effective range of their guns and strike from any direction, often out of the sun or from behind cloud cover. Crews had only seconds to react before bombs and rockets rained down. Even if they survived the initial assault, the attacking aircraft could radio for reinforcements, bringing destroyers and surface ships to finish the job. The flak boat strategy cost Germany far more submarines than aircraft it destroyed. Once again, technology triumphed over tactics. A new weapon, and another defeat. In September 1943, the Germans introduced a new weapon, the G7's T5 Zanko-Nig, acoustic homing torpedo. designed to counter Allied escort ships. The first 80 torpedoes were delivered on August 1, 1943, and saw large-scale use against convoys OS-18 and ON-202 later that September. The torpedoes homed in on the propeller noise of escort vessels, theoretically allowing U-boats to destroy the defenders before targeting merchant ships. Initial results seemed promising, with several escorts damaged or sunk. But once again, the Allies adapted swiftly. Within weeks, they introduced the Foxer noisemaker, a towed acoustic decoy that diverted the homing torpedoes harmlessly away from their targets. The technological arms race had reached its inevitable conclusion. The Allies were now innovating faster than Germany could even respond. Fundamentally, the introduction of acoustic torpedoes could not solve Germany's core problem: its inability to locate Allied convoys in the first place. Even the most advanced weapon was useless if the submarine couldn't approach its target undetected. When Allied radar could spot U-boats before they ever closed in, the acoustic torpedo offered no real advantage. In another effort to counter Allied radar dominance, the German Navy turned to a long-overlooked invention: the snorkel, originally developed by the Dutch in 1938 and captured when Germany invaded the Netherlands in 1940. The device had been dismissed for years. Only in the summer of 1943 did German engineers begin testing it on U-58, with operational deployment beginning in early 1944. The snorkel allowed submarines to run their diesel engines while submerged at periscope depth, enabling them to recharge batteries and travel without fully surfacing. This significantly reduced their exposure to radar-equipped aircraft. But it was far from a perfect solution. The snorkel left a small wake detectable by radar, especially in calm seas. It limited a submarine's speed to only a few knots and demanded exceptional seamanship in rough conditions. When waves washed over the snorkel head, automatic valves would close to prevent flooding, causing sudden drops in air pressure inside the hull. Moments of terrifying suffocation for the crew. By mid-1944, roughly half of all U-boats operating from French bases had been fitted with snorkels. While survival rates improved slightly, the device could not reverse the strategic collapse of the U-boat campaign. Submarines might now evade detection more often, but they could no longer inflict meaningful damage on Allied shipping. The Battle of the Atlantic was already lost. The Type XXI, the missed revolution, the most ambitious German attempt to reclaim technological parity, came in the form of the Type XXI Electroboot. A revolutionary design years ahead of its time. It featured a streamlined hull, triple the battery capacity, and could achieve an astonishing 17.2 knots submerged speed, compared to barely 7.6 knots on the standard Type XXI boats. Armed with 6 forward torpedo tubes and a hydraulic reload system, it could fire 18 torpedoes in under 20 minutes. An unprecedented capability. It also carried advanced sonar and sensor systems, giving it the potential to outpace and outmaneuver most Allied escorts, while remaining submerged for extended periods. Had the Type XXI entered service in 1943 instead of 1945, it might have prolonged the Battle of the Atlantic, or even changed its course. But rushed wartime production crippled the program. Many boats suffered from poor welding, faulty batteries, and incomplete systems. Of the 118 Type XXI submarines completed, only 4 were fully combat, ready by the war's end, and only 2 ever went on patrol. Those final patrols, in April and May 1945, achieved no sinkings before Germany's surrender. The last patrol, the final U-boat mission of the war, encapsulated both the brilliance and futility of Germany's technological efforts. On April 30, 1945, U-2511, the first operational Type XXI, departed under Korvettenkapitän Adalbert Schnee, one of Germany's most decorated and experienced commanders. On May 4th, Schnee detected a British cruiser group and executed a flawless attack approach, closing to firing range without being detected. Despite the enemy's radar coverage, his submarine's superior underwater speed and silent running capabilities had made it virtually invisible. But Schnee never fired. Germany had already begun surrender negotiations. On May 5, 1945, he surfaced, transmitted his position, and ended his patrol, and with it, the U-boat war. In his post-war memoirs, Schnee reflected bitterly, "That day, we proved what the Type XXI could have done had it entered service a year earlier. But by then, the war was already lost. The Allies had won, not through bravery alone, but through technology and industry unleashed in 1942 and 1943. Our most advanced weapon arrived too late to matter." The numbers, the statistical record of the Battle of the Atlantic leaves no doubt about the DV about the decisive role of the cavity magnetron. The funny device that revolutionized Allied radar between January and May 1943, as the first generation ASV Mark Pathuri radar entered service, but before full coverage was achieved, U-boat sank 245 merchant ships, roughly 1.29 million tons of Allied shipping. In the same period, Germany lost 95 submarines, including the catastrophic 41-43 boats lost in May alone. From June 1943 to May 1944, after centimetric radar became standard on most Allied aircraft and ships, merchant losses fell to 185 ships, about 819,000 tons. Even though more U-boats were operating at sea, German losses, however, soared to 237 submarines. The exchange rate had completely reversed. At their peak in March 1943, U-boats sank 82 ships in the Atlantic, 476,000 tons, and 120 ships worldwide, 693,000 tons, losing only 12 boats. By that summer, the pattern had flipped. Fewer than 20 ships sunk per month, with double-digit U-boat losses continuing. The tonnage war was no longer winnable. The May 1943 convoy battles had been Germany's last real chance to break Britain's Atlantic supply line. The discovery of the Rotterdam device in February that year, the captured British radar magnetron, confirmed what many German officers had feared. but refused to believe. The Allies had outpaced German science. Their radar technology had leapt ahead so far that no amount of skill or courage could bridge the gap. Desperation and decline. Post-war analysis of captured U-boats revealed a series of increasingly desperate attempts to fight back. Some submarines were coated in experimental radar, absorbent materials, primitive forerunners of modern stealth coatings. But they added weight, reduced speed, and did almost nothing to diminish radar reflections. Others carried inflatable decoy balloons, designed to confuse radar by creating false targets. These occasionally worked, but couldn't be deployed in rough seas or while submerged. A few boats experimented with modified exhaust systems to reduce the radar signature of snorkel emissions. But these changes often impaired engine performance without eliminating detection. Each measure was a testament to German ingenuity and to the futility of the situation. You cannot hide from electromagnetic waves with mechanical tricks. The physics were merciless. Allied radar operated at wavelengths and power levels that rendered submarines visible under any conditions, day or night, fog or storm. The only real defense was to remain submerged. But Germany's 1943 era batteries couldn't sustain long underwater operations. The U-boats were trapped, caught between the limits of their own technology and an enemy that had mastered the invisible battlefield. A war lost to science. The personal accounts of German naval personnel provide the most haunting evidence of all. These were not excuses written by defeated men. They were testimonies from experts who understood exactly what had gone wrong. Their interrogation records, letters, and post-war memoirs do not speak of tactical blunders or cowardice. Instead, they describe technological obsolescence, the despair of fighting an enemy who could see and strike at will, while they themselves were blind. They spoke of the crushing realization that survival was no longer a matter of skill or courage, but of luck. They described how confidence turned to fatalism, how hunters became the hunted, and how their war ended not in battle, but in revelation. When Oberleutnant Wilhelm Runge examined the captured Rotterdam magnetron in February 1943, he wasn't just studying a device, he was performing an autopsy on the German Navy's strategy. From that moment onward, the outcome of the Battle of the Atlantic, and perhaps of the war itself, was no longer in doubt. The small copper block on his laboratory bench explained everything. Every inexplicable U-boat loss, every impossible Allied interception, every convoy ambush that seemed to anticipate German movements before they even began. The cavity magnetron revealed a devastating truth. Germany had been fighting the Battle of the Atlantic while blind and deaf to the electromagnetic spectrum the Allies now ruled with absolute mastery. That realization shattered the long-held illusion of German technological superiority. It struck harder than any battlefield defeat, proving that Allied science had surpassed German understanding not just in radar, but perhaps in many other secret fields as well. If Britain, under constant bombing and material shortages, could secretly produce such revolutionary technology, what else might they have hidden? The psychological blow was immense. German confidence in its scientific dominance was gone, replaced by uncertainty and fear. From that point forward, German intelligence assessments grew more cautious, always assuming the enemy possessed capabilities beyond their comprehension. The spread of Allied radar superiority by the autumn of 1943. Allied forces had deployed hundreds of centimetric radar systems across ships and aircraft. The Type 271 naval radar, powered by the cavity magnetron, began installation on convoy escorts as early as 1941. It could detect surfaced submarines from 20 kilometers away, and even the small periscope mast from nearly 900 yards. An astonishing leap in detection ability. Operating at a 9.7 centimeter wavelength with 70 kilowatts of peak power, it rendered the ocean's surface transparent to Allied eyes. In the air, RAF Coastal Command began fielding the ASV Mark II radar in March 1943, allowing aircraft to patrol vast stretches of ocean and spot U-boats regardless of darkness, fog, or cloud cover. The American H-2X radar, an evolution of the British H-2S system, operated at an even shorter 3 centimeter wavelength, giving bomber crews unprecedented precision in navigation and targeting, no matter the weather or time of day. Every one of these systems traced its lineage back to that same technological marvel. The cavity magnetron Runge had examined in Berlin that fateful February morning. The Rotterdam device had unlocked Allied electromagnetic dominance across every front. German desperation and technological overstretch. Desperate to counter this invisible weapon, Germany launched a flurry of high-priority research programs. The Naxos radar warning receiver, intended to detect Allied radar signals, consumed enormous scientific talent and industrial resources, but delivered minimal results. U-boat production shifted toward new designs, optimized for extended underwater operation, like the Type I Electroboat, reducing output of conventional boats that might have been more useful elsewhere. German scientists explored increasingly exotic technologies, underwater television cameras, passive sonar networks, even hydrogen peroxide propulsion systems. None reached operational service before the war's end. Each project reflected the brilliance of German engineering, but also the futility of trying to catch up to a scientific revolution already deployed in Allied factories. The final reckoning, the final statistics of the Battle of the Atlantic tell a stark story. Germany commissioned roughly first 181 U-boats during the war. Of these, 785 were destroyed, 648 lost directly to enemy action, the rest scuttled, sunk by accident, or struck from service. Only 156 survived to surrender in May 1945. Of the 40,000 men who served aboard U-boats, around 30,000 never returned, a staggering 75% casualty rate. the highest of any military branch in the entire conflict. These men fought with unmatched bravery and skill. But courage could not overcome physics. They were outmatched by radar, by the unseen pulses of microwave energy that revealed them to the enemy. A legacy beyond war, the cavity magnetron, first developed at Birmingham University in 1939 to 1940 and refined by GEC for military use, became one of the most consequential inventions of the war. Its influence extended far beyond combat. The microwave research that began with radar would go on to power television, broadcasting, satellite communications, and even the microwave ovens that would one day sit in kitchens around the world. The mass production of magnetrons helped birth the post-war electronics revolution of the 1950s and 1960s. Moreover, the Anglo-American cooperation that began with the TISAD mission, the sharing of magnetron technology in 1940, set the stage for decades of scientific collaboration through the Cold War and beyond. The Allies' decision to deploy such advanced technology, even at the risk of its capture, reshaped military policy for generations. It proved that the operational advantage of fielding a revolutionary weapon outweighed the danger of enemy imitation, as long as industrial might ensured production on a scale the enemy could never match. This philosophy would guide Western strategy through the jet age, the nuclear era, and into the information age, always favoring innovation in action over secrecy in theory, the end of the U-boat war. For the German U-boat force, the story ended in surrender and in scuttling. On May 4, 1945, Grand Admiral Karl Nitz, who had briefly become Germany's head of state after Hitler's suicide, ordered all U-boats to cease offensive operations. After the unconditional surrender on May 8, the Allies initiated Operation Deadlight, the systematic disposal of surrendered U-boats. Crews were ordered to surface, fly black flags, and sail to Allied ports for internment. Yet many commanders refused, unwilling to surrender the vessels that had claimed so many lives. They opened the sea valves and scuttled their boats, in a haunting echo of the Scapa Flow scuttling of 1919. Over 200 U-boats were deliberately sunk by their own crews. The men who served in them, the 75% who died, and the few who survived, had fought a campaign decided not by valor, but by science. They were defeated not by ships or planes, but by electromagnetic waves emanating from a block of copper, precision machined in Allied factories and deployed by the tens of thousands. That single device, captured near Rotterdam in February 1943, had foretold their doom. It exposed an invisible dimension of warfare, one Germany never truly understood until it was too late. A war decided by physics, both the statistics and the science point to one inescapable truth. The cavity magnetron changed the outcome of the Battle of the Atlantic more decisively than any general, admiral, or tactic. After the war, Allied scientists often quoted Dr. Luis Alvarez, the American physicist who worked on radar at MIT's radiation laboratory. The cavity magnetron, he said, won the Battle of the Atlantic, the air war over Germany, and ultimately, the war itself. While that statement simplifies a complex reality, the evidence supports his claim. Without centimetric radar, Allied shipping losses would have remained catastrophic through 1943 and 1944. Without radar-equipped aircraft, U-boats would have continued to prowl the Atlantic with impunity. And without the magnetron's detection advantage, the D-Day invasion might never have succeeded. The magnetron, born from pure research in British universities, mass-produced across American and British factories, and deployed on a scale the Axis could never match, created an electromagnetic net that slowly strangled the U-boat fleet. By the time German scientists examined the captured radar set in Telefunken headquarters in February 1943, it was no diagnosis. It was an autopsy. The war at sea had already been lost. The invisible victory, in the end. The story of the Rotterdam device transcends radar and submarines. It symbolizes the decisive advantage that advanced technology confers when combined with industrial strength and scientific collaboration. It reveals the psychological toll of confronting an enemy who can see what you cannot, transforming confident hunters into desperate prey. And it reminds us that sometimes history is changed not by armies or empires, but by something small enough to fit in a scientist's hand, a block of copper, 8 centimeters wide, carved with 8 resonant cavities, arranged around a glowing central cathode, a device that made the invisible visible, and in doing so, reshaped the world. Those German officers who examined it in Berlin understood, perhaps better than anyone, what it meant. They saw not just a piece of Allied equipment, but the physical embodiment of Germany's defeat. The math was undeniable, the physics unforgiving, and the implications final. They returned to their commands, carrying the heaviest knowledge of all. That courage alone could not overcome the electromagnetic supremacy the Allies had created. They fought on because duty demanded it. But deep down, they already knew. The examination of that single device had shown them the future. And it was a future they could not win.